Changing Europe, which Rob is a fellow. Am I right saying that? Yeah. The event is being live streamed to our YouTube channel, so just be aware of that when you come to ask a question or heckle or whatever. Don't think we've got a burly policeman ready to remove you should that happen, but just be aware that you will appear on YouTube if you ask a question. There isn't a fire drill planned in here, so if you do hear a fire alarm, we need to evacuate. I'm sure there are signs out there telling you where to go. The way we are going to run this is Rob is going to go through some slides that he has. Unfortunately, we don't have AV here, so I don't have a screen from which you can see those slides, but underneath you, if you've already sat down, you will have noticed that the slides are available on a piece of paper. So you can follow along with Rob's presentation. After that, I will be turning to our distinguished panel. To my left, we have Polly Toynbee of The Guardian. And we also have Chris Curtis of Opinion, who is also a Labour candidate for, which seat is it, Chris?
Milton Keynes North.
Milton Keynes North. So anyone want to volunteer for canvassing, etc. there, I'm sure you can talk to Chris.
Half an hour on the train from London Euston.
Yes, half an hour from London Euston, he says. So by all means, just pop along there if you're located in London. And Alison McGovern, the MP, will be turning up a little bit late, for which she apologises, but she knew that would be the case. So hopefully by the time Chris and Polly have had their say, Ali will be here and we can ask her some questions. And then I will turn to you for some questions to any member of the panel. So without more ado, I'll introduce Professor Rod Ford.
Did you say there were slides on paper?
Yes, I did.
There are.
Yes,
Yes.
there are.
Do you not have one?
I think you probably do.
Oh, there it is. Sorry.
It's early in the morning. So I think without further ado, we'll now turn to Professor Rod Ford from Manchester University. Rob, take it away.
Thanks, Tim. Good morning, everyone. So this is a little bit of an unusual model for me, because normally I'll have a PowerPoint that I can wave at and explain things to. And instead, we'll all need to follow along with the hymn sheet as I go through. What I want to talk about today, it's something I've in various ways been researching for a number of years, is the education divide that we now see in our politics, where that comes from and what that means for Labour and indeed for all the parties going forward. What you'll see on the first couple of slides is data from the British Election Study Internet Panel. Now, this is an enormous survey that runs about twice a year and has done all the way back to 2014. And if you look at this data and you look at how people say they're going to vote by education level, what you can see is that round about the middle of 2016, a very big divide opens up in terms of people's past educational experiences. People who left school at 16 with GCSE qualifications or no qualifications at all have become very strongly aligned with the Conservative Party. In most of the recent waves of this survey, you're looking at majority support from that group for the Conservative Party. People who have at least an undergraduate degree have aligned with the Labour Party. And people who have post-16 qualifications up to 18, they fall sort of in between on the Conservative side, but they're closer to Labour on the Labour side, which is in particular because graduates also tend to like the Lib Dems as well. So that means that they're very anti-Tory, but not quite as pro-Labour as we might expect. Now, the fact that there's a dashed line there saying EU referendum might give you one clue as to what might be a factor in generating this education divide, and it is indeed the case that Brexit is a major driver of this education divide. That was actually evident even before the EU referendum. The British Election Study asked questions about attitudes to a possible EU referendum right back to 2014, and the exact same divide was there. And I would say it's less a divide, more a chasm. Voters who have GCSE qualifications or less split about 2 to 1 in favour of Brexit. have done all the way through the past 10 years. Voters who have an undergraduate degree or more split 2 to 1 in favour of Remain. And that's a very stable pattern. And it isn't just in Brexit voting preferences, it's in Brexit policy preferences, it's in Brexit identities, basically anything to do with Brexit as a kind of political stance has a huge education divide. And if we run statistical modelling on this to test competing explanations for what might be driving preferences on the EU referendum, education comes out over and over again as one of the strongest predictors, always. The Brexit divide is first and foremost an education divide. But the education divide, I mean, saying education divides people in terms of their Brexit preferences then raises the obvious question, well, why would education lead people to take different views on the issue of EU membership? And that leads us into the question of how education matters politically in the first place. And the answer to that is that education divides feed into a distinctive set of social identities. They inform how we see ourselves in national identity terms. Voters who leave school earlier tend to have much stronger sense of national identity, a narrower sense of national identity. European identity, which is weaker across the board in Britain than national identities are, is strongest, allowing for that amongst graduate, and weakest of all amongst school leavers. Education also increasingly informs our sense of class identity. So voters who leave school early are much more likely to self-identify as working class, and voters who stay on to university are more likely to self-identify as middle class. And self-identification in class terms, incidentally, doesn't line up very clearly with what work people do or what they get paid. It's more complex than that. It's about their sense of self, which can often be to do with family background. It can be to do with culture as well. Holly's written very often on this kind of theme. But this all then feeds in